What's up, View Youth? Hey, we have an exciting conversation planned tonight, and I want to let you guys know we started calling this View Weekly. We decided to call it View Weekly. Every Sunday, we're going to drop different leadership principles, teachings out of the Bible. We even have some funny ones planned. So make sure to join us Sunday at 7 p.m. for View Weekly. And then right after this, you guys are going to want to jump right into this conversation as Colin and I continue to unpack his story a little bit. And we'll have a link in our chat that you guys are in. So there's a Zoom link. So click on it. Let's chat right afterwards. But let's get into it. Colin, thanks so much for coming up. I know you had a little bit of a drive, but I appreciate you coming up.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. I mean, it means a lot, seriously, coming up here. And, this is my home. Growing up here.
Yeah, you're from Lake Stevens.
Yep.
Lake Stevens native. So, Hey, we're going to talk tonight around the idea of resiliency, okay? We're going to talk around how do we as young people bounce back from difficulties within our life. I was thinking this week about COVID-19, and I was thinking about how are we going to, on the backside of this, come out better? How are we going to come out more refined? And how do we have resiliency, the ability to bounce back so that our failings don't become fatal? A lot of times when we follow Jesus, it's difficult to bounce back from things because we were never taught how to bounce back. But tonight we're going to have a conversation with my friend around the idea of resiliency. So if you're taking notes, the title is I Have Fallen and I Can't Get Up. I've fallen and I can't get up. So Colin, we're going to jump a little bit into your story because when I think of resiliency, I think of you. Mm-hmm. I think of you. I think of your testimony from childhood to high school to current and the things that you've had to really overcome as a young person and just how you've continued to journey through what life has thrown at you. And so when I think of resiliency, when I think of somebody that has the ability to bounce back, I think of you. Mm-hmm. So will you just kind of unpack your story a little bit around the idea of resiliency, of failing, of falling, of seeing those things, and how did you respond? Go ahead and open us up kind of with a little bit of maybe your childhood.
So I was born in 1998. I lived in an apartment right next to Jay's Market in downtown Lake Stevens. And life was, it was normal. It was regular everyday life. And when I think of like people's testimonies, like they always say like, it was good up until blank. Mm-hmm. Like my life was good up until this point in life. But that was how it was for me. Like I was 4 years old. Life was, completely normal, completely fine. And, I had a little brother, had my mom, had my dad, and my dad really struggled with addiction, growing up as a kid. He really, dealt with like drugs and alcohol, and, it followed him. And he ended up going to prison when I was 4 years old. So that kind of put a little damper on my like life and, the way I saw life and, my world wasn't so perfect, and especially being in a place like Lake Stevens, very similar to Snohomish, you kind of go under the radar as a kid. Everything's normal, plain Jane type of living. And, people don't really notice the really dark things that happen in your life. But grew up, started going to church, started going to youth group in the 6th grade, and just fell in love with the local church. I remember I would always go to my friend's house, and all we would talk about was youth events, the youth nights and different games that we would have in the church. And that's what, gave me a lot of joy growing up. And then I remember it was my mom remarried, and I think it was probably 8th grade. My mom remarried, and my grandpa was watching me and my little brother during their honeymoon, and he ended up having a heart attack, and he ended up dying right in front of us.
Wow.
So, it was just like one thing after the next. And, I'm not saying this to say like, oh, my story's so dark or my story's so, depressing, but it was in that I really discovered a lot of who I was, and I'm starting to see that now at 22 years old. It wasn't then. I didn't see it then. I didn't see, how God was interacting with me in those moments.
Yeah.
Right after that, I started drinking. I started smoking. I started, I was invested into pornography. I was an addict. I was living the same life that my dad was living. And I mean, being in high school in Lake Stevens, like all I wanted was to be wanted, like all I wanted was to fit in and have like the normal life, go on to the lake, hang out with my friends. And, inside I had this like deep, dark secret of, all these things I was doing. Like on the outside, everything looked normal, but on the inside, like I was really struggling. I was really lost in high school. And so I knew that there was something more to life. I knew that there was hope. I knew that there was peace. Even in, such a dark time in my life, nobody's childhood, is ideal, but to us, it's the biggest thing in the world when, things happen and darkness surrounds us, and, what are you going to do in response to that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, incredible. One, just what you've had to walk through at such a young age with your dad and your grandpa, two probably huge male role models in your life, which is really difficult, to navigate as a young person. I can relate to the dad thing, not going to prison, but dad being absent and what that does to you as a young man, as you're trying to search for identity and all these things. I want to talk now about after high school. I know you went off to kind of a church internship. What led you to that church internship? And how'd you get down there? And how long did you stay down there? And then after that, I have a follow-up question. But how did you how'd you get down? There? Yeah, how'd you get down to that church internship?
Yeah, I mean, Lake Stevens and Puyallup, those are like two extremely different places. And
totally.
I was I remember it was my senior year of high school. I was still, just messing up. And I remember I had a couple friends over, and it was just a night of, hanging out, drinking, just, doing the normal, every day, what people do on the weekends. And I woke up, and I remember this morning specifically because everyone was gone. It was just me there. The house was trashed. Like my parents were coming back, and I was just.
They didn't even help
depressed.
you clean up.
No, they didn't help me.
That's rude.
They didn't help me clean up, and I was sad, man. Like, it started off with me being sad because like my friends weren't there, but then I started to really look at my life. Yeah. And I started to see, oh man, like, my life is in shambles right now. Like my life is not what I expected it to be. I mean, I thought that there was so much more to life, and I had a friend, my senior year of high school. His name's Tyler Hansen. And he was going to this church on the weekends to do worship. And so he was talking to me about this internship. And, man, I don't know if it was just me and I didn't have options for my future or if it was God's, divine alignment. But for some reason, it felt right. It felt like a good fit. Ended up moving down to Puyallup in 2016 and then did an internship for 4 years. And, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. Blew my mind.
Cool.
Learned about myself in ways I didn't expect I would.
Yeah.
But it definitely revealed a lot to me.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the internship. And I want to share the scripture that we're going to kind of feed off of a little bit. It's 2 Samuel 12:20. Because we're going to get in the next part of our conversation. And this is after David has a moral failing with Bathsheba. You guys have ever read the story. And it says this. Then David arose from the earth, and he washed and he anointed himself. He changed his clothes, and he went into the house of the Lord, and he worshiped. And then he went into his own house, and he ate some food. So now I want to get into, because you got this early stage of your childhood, you have this internship, and a lot of things are starting to go well. You got a lot of favor in your life. You got a lot of influence within youth ministry, just in ministry in general. You got a great name, and then all of a sudden, you had a little falling. What happened? What were you afraid of? What led to that? Because it's not about if we fall, it's when and how we respond. It's how we respond and how we're resilient in those times, right? And so failure doesn't define us. Response to failure always defines us. But what were you afraid of?
Yeah.
What were you afraid of losing?
Yeah.
What lies were you telling yourself during that time?
Yeah.
Will you kind of just unpack that just a little bit as we begin to kind of wrap up, and then we're gonna continue to go into further conversation with some of our students after this. But what were you afraid of?
Yeah, I mean, in this internship, you know, like you said, I had great opportunities. I had great opportunities to build teams. I had, you know, opportunities to speak on a stage, and, you know, looking at it on hindsight, like you look at it and you're just like, man, I was doing a good work for God, and you know, that's work I can be proud of. But I built my life on ministry. I built my life on the church, and the church isn't a bad thing. Ministry isn't a bad thing. I mean, obviously, like, this is reaching people, but I idolized it. I idolized it over my relationship with God.
Yeah.
And
wow.
I got lost, you know, I got misdirected, and, you know, I fell into temptation. And I mean, when you build your life not on the cross and off of, you know, the resurrection of Jesus, like you said, you know, things will come. I mean, John 16:33 says it clearly.
Yep.
You know, for I've told you these things so that in me you will have peace. In this world you will face trouble. And, you know, it's a guarantee. Like, we will face trouble. But I didn't build my life off of Jesus in this internship. Like, you would expect, you know, coming into this internship, oh man, I'm going to discover so much of myself. Like, I'm going to learn so much about my personal relationship with Jesus. And you get so caught up in numbers and, you know, performance and projects. And I got really, really misdirected by, you know, my own desires. And now seeing myself now, it's really relatable to how we see David in the scripture in 2 Samuel. Like, I remember I hit this low moment, and I messed up, and I ended up being suspended from this internship for a period of time. I mean, just being transparent. Like, you know, I messed up. I didn't tell the truth, frankly, because I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to have, you know, this image about me.
And you, I don't want to get into the weeds of it, but you hid it for a while.
Yeah, I hit.
You carried that for a while,
almost a year, and I mean, I was scared, and it's because I idolized church. You know, people didn't give me peace, so people can't take it away, and that's something I didn't recognize.
That's
like, I didn't recognize that, you know, God gave me peace, so nobody, regardless, you know, if I'm being transparent, you know, and revealing myself, like, people can't take away my peace, and that's something that didn't make sense to me. Yeah. And so I hid that for a year. And, you know, what I think is so important to recognize is the moment when I just hit my low. Yeah. Like, the moment when I had nothing. I remember I was just got off work at Anthem making coffee, and I called you, actually. I just told you kind of what was happening. Told you that I uncovered myself, and I was just lost. And, you know, I remember you said that to me, like, failure wasn't in my action, but, you know, what really defines me is how I'm going to respond out of this season. In 2 Samuel, we see that with David. You know, his servants are telling him that his child had died. And, you know, the very thing that he was praying against ended up happening. But David's response, it was different. It didn't make sense to the servants. They were astonished. They were absolutely blown away by, you know, this man isn't mourning, but he's, you know, shaving. He's cleaning himself. He's worshiping. And, you know, I found myself in that moment. And I started to recognize that it wasn't because of David's strength that he did that. David only had God. And I think that he came to that conclusion. You know, people in Snohomish, like youth, and, you know, in Lake Stevens, and, you know, Everett, and all these areas, they have a lot to hide. You know, I know it firsthand. Like, I have friends that, you know, I see now and I graduated with, and they're still hiding. They're still hiding their shame. They're still hiding, you know, the sin that they are walking in. You know, to be honest, they're just scared, you know, and I was scared. Like, I was scared to reveal myself. Like, nobody wants to reveal yourself. And the reason why is because, you know, we look at how the world treats people that, you know, are not perfect, are not, you know, don't have it all together. and we're just bombarded with it. And, I just think, building your life on Jesus, as though, it seems so simple, and, it seems so like, it's building your life on Jesus isn't this huge equation. Like building your life off of, I'm going to be transparent and I'm going to live my life in this transparency. Like it's so simple, and yet we try to overcomplicate it. We try to, what I kind of came to the conclusion is I'll never be perfect, but I can always be transparent.
That's good. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I can never be perfect, but I'll always be transparent.
Yeah, man.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's good. Last question before we wrap it up, and I just want this to be a quick thought. How did you learn how to have the ability to bounce back?
Yeah.
Like, because it's not easy to go from like kind of like on a pedestal, like within ministry, just within life, right? It's not easy to like feel like you're doing really well by performance where everybody's looking at you, and then to have and then have the ability to bounce back. What brought you back? Like a lot of people quit in those situations, man. Yeah. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I have friends that like you fail and it becomes fatal. Yep. It takes them out of ministry. It takes them out of life. It takes them out. I mean, so how did you learn how to have the ability to bounce back? What brought you back?
Yeah, no, I think that, just relaying it to like the story of David in 2 Samuel, was a lot of me understanding, that it's just me and God.
Yeah.
And that's it. I remember having a conversation with you, and just calling you and telling you kind of what happened. And, it's so true what you said about, it's, failure wasn't in what I did or how I messed up, but it's in, how I respond now. Like, and, I think that similar to David, like me and God, it's just me and him. And, I think back to like how David, he didn't continue with more mourning. His son died. He was praying and praying and praying and weeping to God, like, God, please don't take my son. God, please don't take my son. And, it ended up happening. And, he didn't continue with more mourning, but instead he got up and he shaved and he cleaned himself and he started worshiping.
Yeah.
And, I think that that's a good way to respond, And another thing is like my response isn't going to look like everyone else's response.
Right.
Again, his servants, they were so astonished by the way that he responded. They were so like, how is he responding like this? Like, this guy's psycho. Like he's not mourning anymore. He's not crying anymore, but he's worshiping. And, I think that for a youth that is trying to respond out of a mistake or, trying to break away from something, it's not going to make sense to people. It's not going to make sense to your parents. It's not going to make sense to the people that are closest to you, but that's okay. Yeah. Like, it's okay because it's always meant to be you and God.
Right.
I mean, relay it back to Adam and Eve. Like, that's what God intended for us, to be exposed, to be transparent. And I just think that that's such a beautiful image, especially in this time of quarantine. I think that people are learning a lot more about themselves because they're frankly not around people. You don't have the front to put on anymore. You don't have this, I don't have to look the part anymore. I don't have to act the part anymore. And for some people, they've been living in that character for so long that their true self is starting to come out alone in their room, and they're scared.
Wow.
And they're scared of what they see. They're scared of, the person that they see in the mirror. And, what I would say to you is just, find your time where it's just you and God and you're just worshiping. You're not worshiping for any other agenda. You're not asking for any other thing, but you're saying, God, I am a wreck. I am dirty, but Lord, you created in me something so much more. I don't live by my name anymore. I live by the name of Jesus now.
Yeah.
So I think that, out of my response, it wasn't out of my strength, but it was out of just this, God, I just need you. Like I just need you in this season. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I remember that season for you, and I remember grace becoming very real. Mm-hmm. Like, you could talk about grace, you can, share about grace, you could teach about grace, but grace is an experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Grace is an experience when you experience something that you do not deserve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet God in his love and his goodness and in his mercy has provided that through Jesus. And you realize, like, this is why grace exists, for us to bounce back.
Yep.
Right?
Yep,
Grace
real.
exists to pick us back up, which
Yep.
you've done, you've experienced, which I'm so proud of you, because a lot of people stay down. They allow that failing to become fatal, and you've allowed God's grace to become strong when you were weak. And you've admitted your wrongs. You've come face to face with your wrongs. You've stared down your wrongs. You took a step back from ministry. You did the hard work to allow Jesus to do the heart surgery and the character building that he needed to do in that season. And you probably experienced more of God and more of God's grace in that season than ever before, you know?
No, that's real. I mean, taking that step back out of ministry, like, you would think it'd be like the most, a person that's called to be a pastor and he has to like take a step back. Like it almost for some people doesn't make sense. And that's why a lot of people, when they mess up, they don't take breaks, because they feel like that, they feel so good when they're in the church. So they feel so good when they're serving. And that's a great indicator that you have made ministry your God.
Wow.
Because you're fueled by serving. You're fueled by,
acting the part.
and being
it's just
in the
like
part.
Being in in the front of church people.
Yep. And
faking it till you make it. All those things.
Yep. And I just think that, it's so important to be able to say to yourself, like, man, at the end of the day, if I don't have a church building one day, if I don't have a ministry one day, my life is already great. And another thing, I remember my close friend said this to me, because this is something that I also was struggling with, was closure. And, I think for youth, they struggle with closure. They struggle with, they hurt me, but I'm waiting for a sorry, or, please forgive me. I remember specifically, he said this to me. He said, don't sacrifice your freedom for closure.
Wow.
And
that's good.
Because simply said as this is that, the very person that left you, the very person that is showing, obviously, they don't care about you. They don't want to be with you. You're giving them the keys to your freedom because you're waiting for closure.
Wow. That's good.
Instead of waiting for closure, just move on.
Yeah.
Like David knew that there was more work ahead. And there was his son Solomon who rebuilt the temple.
Yep.
Imagine if David never got up, never bounced back. Like, what would the church look like today?
Yeah.
And I just think that, it's those people that find themselves in the deepest ditch that they're going to have trophies to say, this is where God showed up. This is where God displayed his love to me.
Yeah.
And, I just think that's a beautiful way to live. It's a place where you're just kind of saying, this is out of my hands now, and I'm just going to trust God.
Yeah. Yeah. I read something as we wrap up. It just reminded me, I read a book called Messy, and it talked about the messiness of life, grace, mercy. And at the end it said, stay messy. God likes it that way. Mm-hmm. And it just reminded me of, like, only God's allowed to be perfect.
Yep.
I'm just supposed to follow.
Yep. That's real.
And be honest and be in community and love people in the church. So Colin, thank you so much for joining and being honest and vulnerable and transparent and opening up. I know you love this area, and this is like hometown for you. And so you have a lot of context to this area, but I'm just really proud of your ability to bounce back and be resilient and not allow failing to be fatal. So we have a lot more questions and we have a lot more conversation. And so we're going to jump over to Let's Chat.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about a little bit more of your story. I got a couple more questions that I want our students to kind of dive into. And then I want to open it up for students, if they can, to ask you questions based on your story, or just about you. I think it's really, really interesting.
Yeah,
so thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode. I don't know if you can call them episodes, but we're going to call it an episode of View Weekly. We love you, man. Thanks for joining us.